Hello and welcome back to the channel where once again it's time for another first impressions video in my PlayStation 2 series, with today's game being another racing game, this time in the form of Off-Road, or if you're in the North American region, Foad Racing Off-Road. It was originally released in March of 2008 over here in the PAL region before getting a North American release in July of the same year. It also saw release on the PC, the PSP and the Nintendo Wii, and if this is sounding somewhat familiar to some viewers, then that is because I did take a look at the Wii version of this game during my first impressions series for that console back at the start of the year. If you can cast your mind back to when I spoke about it on the Wii, I did mention one of the biggest drawbacks of that version was the fact that you could not use the classic or pro controller or even a nunchuck to control your vehicle, so instantly my expectations for the PlayStation 2 version were slightly higher, at least in regards to how well it should play. Like always, I'll be playing through the game for around 60 to 90 minutes before summarising my initial thoughts on the visuals, sound, gameplay, content and lifespan, and then finally deciding whether it's a game that I will play more of in the future, and then finally awarding it a grade based on its first impressions. Once you hit the main menu, you will see you've got Quick Race, Career Mode, Tournament Mode, Arcade Mode, Multiplayer and Options. Heading into the options, it's pretty basic stuff that you can change with your profile settings, game options, audio options, controls, and you can also view the credits. There isn't really much to change within the game options other than the camera and whether you want the game to be set in kilometers or miles per hour, whether you want autosave on or off, and also choosing between standard 4x3 or widescreen support. As always, I'm going to start with the visuals first, and for a budget title that came out during the PlayStation 3 era, I feel Off-Road on the PS2 doesn't look too bad in all fairness. The courses that I managed to play through all looked relatively decent, if not spectacular, with reasonable levels of variety. Pop-up is kept very minimal, with only some small texture details being noticeable in the distance, and the performance of the game on the whole is also absolutely fine. The vehicles don't have anywhere near the levels of details that were present on more major racing titles on the system, such as the Gran Turismo games, but they are certainly functional and recognizable, and they do a satisfactory job. You do also get a few visual effects when you're driving through the different terrain and splashing through puddles too, which adds a minor element of realism to the game as well. Menu presentation and layout is pretty clear and easy to understand too, with it being fairly good for a budget title. The only thing that I'm going to really sting the PlayStation 2 version for is the fact that whilst you can select widescreen support in the options settings, the whole game isn't actually programmed to output in widescreen, which is a tad frustrating and admittedly was in a fair amount of PlayStation 2 games back then. What this means is that all of the racing action within the game is programmed to display in full anamorphic widescreen and looks absolutely fine, but all of the menus, full motion video and map screens within the game are programmed to be 4:3 aspect ratio only, meaning when widescreen is turned on, they are simply stretched to fill the screen, which does put a minor downer on the presentation levels of the game. Of course though, you can simply just play the game all the way through in 4:3 aspect ratio if you prefer. So moving on to the sound effects and music, and much like the visuals, there aren't really any issues in terms of the quality of what's on offer here. The vehicles, whilst all sounding relatively similar to one another, still sound reasonably good as they race around the courses, traversing the different terrain and smacking into the CPU vehicles too, with suitably decent sound effects for everything that is going on. The quality of the music, whilst being somewhat generic, is actually quite good to race to, with the only downside being the sheer lack of music that the game has to offer, and the fact that all of the musical tracks within the game are also incredibly short. This was the issue with the Wii version of the game too, and it remains the issue with the PlayStation 2 version as well, because with the tracks all being so short and the fact that there aren't many of them, you guessed it, the game gets very repetitive from a sound perspective incredibly quickly, as it feels like you're hearing the same tunes every few minutes, which, as a matter of fact, you are. But regardless of this, I will give you some samples of the music within the game because, like I said before, it is of a reasonable quality. In regards to gameplay, the Nintendo Wii version of the game suffered immensely in regards to basic controls because you could not use a classic or pro controller or even a nunchuck to control the vehicles, with you instead having to hold the Wii remote sideways and use motion controls or the minuscule D-pad, making it incredibly awkward and cumbersome to control. Thankfully, there are no such issues on the PlayStation 2 version, and as such, the game actually plays quite well. The vehicles all handle suitably different from one another dependent on their individual ratings, and it's actually a pretty good pick up and play racing game. In terms of the flow of the game, in regards to the career or tournament modes, you start with a small amount of money to purchase a vehicle with, and then you will need to win the challenges or races to unlock more content to progress through, whilst also unlocking more powerful and capable vehicles to purchase and control too. Now in reality, this sounds absolutely fine and incredibly functional, if not unique, but I feel that there are some major issues with the game. First of all, the challenges in the career mode are incredibly frustrating, as once you've done just the first few events, you'll be lumbered with annoying challenges that involve you continually picking up the correct coloured time extenders, reaching checkpoints within time limits whilst also being victorious in the race, collecting certain amounts of money during races to proceed, and also expedition challenges which will require you to find a certain number of artifacts during a race. As if the challenges weren't enough already, the CPU cars are incredibly aggressive and will continually plow into you even if it pushes themselves off course, as it would seem their primary objective is simply to prevent you from winning rather than winning themselves. This also causes another issue for you as your vehicle sustains damage, which will adversely affect the performance, meaning that you will have to go out of your way to find repair pods in the races or spend money on fixing the cars between races too. To cap it all off, it can actually be quite difficult to win the races too, as the difficulty cannot be changed for the career or tournament modes, meaning you might find yourself getting quite frustrated. In regards to the tournament mode, it is more of a standard affair, with you competing in a number of races within each event, requiring you to win the event before you can progress on to the next one. Indeed, if you're a fan of pure racing, you are much more likely to find the tournament mode suitable to you rather than the career mode. Moving on to content and lifespan, and obviously you have the career mode and the tournament mode as the two main modes of play, with the career mode being more challenge based and the tournament mode being more traditional racing. Both modes though involve you winning races, collecting money and buying new cars to race in. Once you've unlocked cars and tracks in either of the main modes, you'll be able to use them in the arcade mode and the two-player mode, with the arcade mode letting you pick a different race type, for example the damage control challenge or coin rush option, and then take part in those on your chosen course. You've also got a quick race option too, which simply gives you a random car to control on a random track for some instant racing action, although this can be a little bit bit imbalanced, as you may find yourself racing against CPU cards which are a fair bit faster than yours. In terms of cars and courses, there are 18 licensed cars and 24 courses in total, so there's actually a fair amount of content within the game to unlock and play through, with the career mode in particular being relatively substantial and also incredibly challenging. The biggest problems that I spoke about on the Wii version though are still here on the PS2 though as well, as many of the challenges in the career mode are simply frustrating and don't provide you with any enjoyment whatsoever. It really is like they've been put in there to attempt to drag the game out rather than provide you with challenging but enjoyable content, which means you're unlikely to want to play through the game to unlock every car and track on offer. Whilst the game obviously does have a 2-player mode as well, I can genuinely think of dozens of other PlayStation 2 racing games that will provide you and a friend with a better multiplayer experience than this one, certainly in terms of pure enjoyment at least anyway. So like always, that leaves me with my two final questions. Is the PlayStation 2 version of Off-Road a game that I will come back to and play more of in the future, with me potentially unlocking all of the vehicles and tracks that the game has to offer? And what final grade am I going to give it based on its first impressions? In regards to playing the game more, I have actually done that, and I have tried my best to like the game, and I genuinely feel in terms of its basic gameplay and controlling the vehicles that it is reasonably good, with the potential to be a decent budget racing game. But all of the niggles that I have mentioned pile up into one big mountain, meaning it is not a racing game that I will be coming back to ever play again. In terms of an overall grade based on its first impressions, it probably is slightly better than the Wii version in this regard, simply because of the fact it's better to play on the PS2. Other than this though, there really isn't much difference between the two versions, with the Wii version perhaps being slightly sharper and also having a slightly larger screen size too. But of course I would say take into account the fact that the Wii is over 6 years newer than the PlayStation 2, and with all of that being said, I'm going to give the PlayStation 2 version of Off-Road a C- grade, because whilst initially seeming like a relatively decent budget racer, the flaws in terms of aggressive CPU and frustrating challenges really do bring it down somewhat. Like always though, these are simply my thoughts and my thoughts alone, and in all fairness, I doubt anybody at all watching this video even bothered buying Off-Road on the PlayStation 2 when it came out, as by 2008 the large majority of people were playing on their PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, or indeed the Nintendo Wii. But on the off chance you did play it on the PlayStation 2, or if you just want to simply share your thoughts on the video, then let me know down below with a comment like always, and of course I will be back in the near future with another video. Goodbye for now.